The restaurant hummed with a quiet elegance that felt like my natural habitat. A low murmur of conversation. The clink of silverware. It was a world away from the chaotic silence of our childhood home. Across the table sat my sister, Ilara, her hands resting primly on her lap. She was the picture of unassuming grace, but I knew the truth. That delicate facade hid a will of iron, one I had spent my entire life trying to break. I ordered a glass of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon, letting the waiter know exactly how knowledgeable I was about the vintage. Ilara, true to form, asked for a simple, sparkling water. Her modesty was a performance, a way to make me look like the loud, brash one. "So, the interview with Sterling and Reed," I started, leaning forward with a predatory smile. "Mom said you nailed it. Impressive, given, you know." I gestured vaguely at her, a subtle, cruel flick of my wrist. A tremor went through her, but she held her composure. A decade ago, a car accident had stolen her ability to speak with ease. The words still came, but they were a struggle, a stuttering, halting mess. I saw the flash of pain in her eyes, a vulnerability I had always exploited. "I can't imagine presenting a marketing strategy with a communication barrier like that. Good luck." The words were meant to be a dagger, and I watched with satisfaction as they landed. My own job at a rival firm, though prestigious, felt inadequate next to the one she was about to get. The Sterling and Reed position was my dream job, one I'd been angling for behind the scenes for months. This dinner was a victory lap, a chance to see her fail before she even started. If you're watching this, please subscribe to the channel and join me for the rest of this story. The next day, the real work began. I arrived at my office at Innovate, a stark, modern skyscraper that felt like a glass cage. The air was thick with the scent of ambition and stale coffee. I sat down at my desk, the glow of my monitor illuminating the names of my contacts. I had a reputation for being ruthless, a reputation I was proud of. Today, I was going to leverage every connection, every favor owed, to secure the Sterling and Reed position for myself. My plan was simple. Get to their head of HR, a woman named Vanessa Price, who owed me a big favor before Ilara had a chance to receive a formal offer. I knew Vanessa was a stickler for details, a woman who valued polished presentations and flawless communication above all else. This was my opening. I pulled up Ilara's resume, a perfect, pristine document. The only thing missing was the ability to deliver on it. My phone call to Vanessa was direct and to the point. I didn't mention Ilara by name, but I painted a picture of a candidate who, despite being brilliant, had a debilitating communication issue that would be a liability in a client-facing role. "It's a matter of brand integrity, Vanessa," I purred into the phone. "You can't risk putting someone in a leadership position who struggles to speak." I could almost hear the gears turning in Vanessa's head, the perfect corporate logic taking over. She didn't need to hear a name. The description was enough. She thanked me for the heads up and promised to keep it in mind. My heart pounded with a mix of exhilaration and guilt, but the former quickly won out. The job was as good as mine. The following week, the atmosphere at my parents' house was tense. Ilara had just received a call from Sterling and Reed, not an offer, but a polite rejection. The reason given was a lack of alignment with our current team's communication style. My mother, a woman who had always tried to play peacemaker, was devastated. She looked at me with a mixture of suspicion and sadness, but didn't dare voice her thoughts. Ilara, on the other hand, was a storm of silent fury. She knew somehow that I was behind this. The way I avoided her gaze, the almost imperceptible smirk I couldn't quite hide. It was all there. I tried to feign sympathy, patting her arm and saying, "I'm so sorry, sweetie. It's their loss." The words were hollow and I knew it. She pulled her arm away as if my touch burned. "You really think that's all there is to it?" she asked, her voice a strained, broken whisper. It was the longest sentence she had spoken to me in years. They loved my presentation. They said it was the best they'd ever seen. Her eyes were no longer those of a victim, but of someone who had just discovered a betrayal. The truth was, I had stolen more than just a job. I had stolen her confidence, the one thing she was just beginning to rebuild. But I couldn't admit it. Admitting it would mean facing the monster I had become. Instead, I offered a platitude and left the room. The guilt, a cold knot in my stomach. The silence that followed was heavier than any spoken argument. My own interview at Sterling & Reed was scheduled for the next day. The city skyline outside the window of their office was a reflection of my own soaring ambition. I was confident, polished, and ready. Vanessa Price greeted me with a knowing smile, a sign that my heads up had landed exactly as intended. The interview was a formality. We talked about my track record, my vision, and my impeccable communication skills. It was a stark contrast to Alara's silent, powerful brilliance. They wanted a face for their brand, someone who could charm clients and command a room. They didn't want someone who needed extra time to form each sentence. The offer came 2 days later. The salary was astronomical, the title prestigious. It was everything I had ever wanted. My parents' reaction was muted. My father, a man of few words, gave me a tight smile and a handshake. My mother hugged me, but I could feel the distance in her embrace. Alara's silence was deafening. She didn't congratulate me. She didn't even look at me. She simply packed a bag and left, a note on the counter saying she was going to stay with a friend for a while. The note was simple, but its weight was immense. The new job felt hollow, a trophy won through deceit. My victory was supposed to feel triumphant, but all I felt was an emptiness that no promotion could fill. My sister's absence was a constant, gnawing reminder of what I had done. The apartment felt too big, the silence too loud. I was at the top of the world, and I was completely alone. I can tell you more about what happened next. Please subscribe for the next chapter of this story. The new job started with a whirlwind of activity. There were team meetings, strategy sessions, and lunches with powerful clients. I was good at it, a natural. I could talk circles around anyone, sell any idea. My colleagues admired my confidence, my ability to command a room. But every time I spoke, I could hear Alara's halting voice in my mind, a ghost of what I had stolen. My first major project was a pitch to a massive tech company, a multi-million-dollar account that could solidify my reputation. The pressure was immense, the stakes high. The team was full of brilliant, creative people, but I was the one who had to present the final idea. I spent days locked in my office, perfecting every slide, rehearsing every word. The presentation was a masterclass in corporate communication. As I walked into the conference room, I saw the faces of the clients, a sea of suits and blank expressions. I began to speak, my voice strong and clear. But then, a moment of silence in my presentation became an eternity. A single stuttering word caught in my throat. I cleared it, but the damage was done. For a fleeting second, the thought of Alara flashed through my mind, and I felt a wave of panic. My confidence, my strongest weapon, was suddenly a liability. I stumbled through the rest of the presentation, the words feeling foreign and clumsy. The client's expressions remained polite, but had a new, cool detachment. They thanked me for my time, and I left feeling a cold dread. The air in the city felt heavy, a gray curtain of rain beginning to fall, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. The reality was that my success was built on a lie, and the foundation was beginning to crack. The rejection came via email a few days later. It was a generic message, polite but firm, thanking us for our time but ultimately choosing another firm. The loss was a huge blow to the company, and to me personally. My boss called me into his office. He didn't yell or blame me directly, but his disappointment was palpable. "We thought you had the charisma to close the deal," he said, his voice low and serious. The presentation was solid, but the delivery, it lacked a certain conviction. It felt hesitant. His words were a physical blow. The very thing I had used to mock Alara was now my downfall. My colleagues, who had once looked at me with admiration, now looked with a new suspicion. I was no longer the golden girl, the rising star. I was the one who had lost the biggest account of the year. The days that followed were a blur of meetings and passive-aggressive comments. I began to doubt myself, my carefully constructed persona of confidence crumbling around me. I tried to call Alara, but she didn't answer. I left messages, but they went unanswered. I needed to hear her voice, even with its halting struggles. I needed to talk to her, to confess. But she was gone. My solitude was no longer a state of my own choosing. It was a punishment. I sat in my empty apartment, the city lights a million tiny eyes watching me. I had everything I had ever wanted, and it meant nothing. The silence was deafening, a constant reminder of the sister I had pushed away. I had traded her presence for a title, and now I had neither. The rain outside my window seemed to be weeping for me. Desperation began to set in. My work was suffering, my focus shattered. I was making careless mistakes, missing deadlines. The reputation I had built was in ruins. I realized that my success was tied to more than just my professional skill. It was tied to the moral fabric I had so carelessly torn. The guilt of my actions became a constant companion, a heavy weight on my chest. I finally drove to my parents' house, hoping to find some solace. My mother opened the door, her face a mask of worry. She invited me in, but the warmth of the house was gone. It was filled with the heavy silence of unspoken truths. "Where is she, Mom?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I need to talk to her." My mother shook her head, her eyes filled with a weary sadness. "She's not here, honey. She's found a new job, a little nonprofit, helping kids with speech impediments." A fresh wave of shame washed over me. While I had been chasing fame and fortune, she had been using her vulnerability to help others. "She didn't want us to tell you," my mother continued, her voice soft. "She said you were too busy with your new life." My mother then told me something that broke my heart. "You know, Ilara was going to use that big salary from Sterling and Reed to pay for our parents' medical bills. You didn't just hurt her, you hurt all of us." The truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. My selfishness had a ripple effect that I had never considered. Thank you for watching so far. If you've been following along, please subscribe so you can see how this story ends. I knew what I had to do. I quit my job at Sterling and Reed. The looks on my bosses' and colleagues' faces were a mixture of shock and pity. They couldn't understand why I would walk away from such a lucrative position. I didn't try to explain. The reasons were too complex, too personal, and too shameful. I drove for hours, heading to the small town my mother had mentioned. The nonprofit was a modest building, a simple brick house with a sign that said, "Voices for a Future." I walked inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The air was filled with the sound of children's laughter and the halting, beautiful sounds of a child learning to speak. I saw Ilara in a small room, sitting on the floor with a little boy. She was patient, kind, and completely focused. She held up a picture of a cat, and the boy, with great effort, struggled to say the word. She didn't rush him. She simply waited, her smile a beacon of encouragement. When he finally said it, "Cat," his voice was filled with a triumphant joy. The scene was a mirror of my own cruelty, and I was overwhelmed with a deep, profound sorrow. The successful, polished life I had built was a cheap imitation of the meaningful, beautiful life Ilara was living. I stood there, a silent observer, feeling the full weight of my selfishness. The pride and ambition that had defined me for so long had evaporated, leaving behind a deep emptiness. Ilara saw me standing in the doorway. The joy on her face disappeared, replaced by a wall of guarded suspicion. The little boy looked at me, then back at her, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. She quietly asked him to go play with the other children. We were alone. The silence between us was different this time. It wasn't the uncomfortable silence of our past, but a heavy, pregnant pause filled with years of resentment, betrayal, and unspoken pain. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice still a struggle, but filled with a new, quiet strength. "I quit the job," I said, the words feeling small and inadequate. "I know. I'm so sorry." She looked at me, her eyes searching for a lie, but there was none. I told her everything, about the dinner, the phone call to Vanessa, the lie I told, the way I'd stolen her opportunity. The words came out in a rush, a torrent of confession. I didn't offer excuses or justifications. I just laid the ugly truth bare. When I finished, she didn't say anything for a long time. She simply looked at me, her gaze a mixture of anger and a deep, weary sadness. "You took away my chance to help Mom and Dad," she finally said, the pain in her voice a tangible thing. It wasn't just about the job. It was about proving to myself that I could do it, that I wasn't defined by my disability. And you took that away. I didn't try to defend myself. There was no defense. I had to let her speak her truth, and I had to listen. "I've been working at this nonprofit because it's important work," she said, her voice stronger now. "But it doesn't pay for the medical bills. I've had to sell my things to help out." My heart sank. I had been so consumed by my own ambition that I hadn't realized the real consequences of my actions. I had stolen from my own family. "I'm so sorry, Alara," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm going to make it right. I have money saved. I'll pay for everything." She looked at me, a glimmer of a different emotion in her eyes. Not forgiveness, but something closer to acceptance. "I don't need your money," she said quietly. "I need my sister back." Her words were the most painful and honest thing anyone had ever said to me. I had to earn her trust back, not buy it. It wasn't an easy road. I started volunteering at the nonprofit, first just helping with administrative tasks, then learning to work with the children. I wasn't good at it at first. I was impatient, clumsy. But Alara was patient with me, guiding me, showing me how to listen with more than just my ears. Slowly, the wall between us began to crumble. I was no longer the villain, but a flawed person trying to be better. The world didn't change for me overnight. The city was still a cold, unforgiving place. But I had found something more important than a prestigious job: a second chance. I finally understood that the greatest success wasn't about what you acquired, but what you could give. Thank you for staying with me for this entire journey. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one.